Hello again, it's Steve here with Astronomy Daily. It's the 28th of October 2024.
Astronomy Daily, the podcast, with your host, Steve Dunkley.
Yes, it's great to have you with us, folks. Another mixed bag on Astronomy Daily. Stories about NASA working on Starliner issues. Crew 8 member released from hospital. Chandrayaan is off and running again. A Chinese company ready to put tourists in space, believe it or not. Fresh findings from Apollo 16 samples. But we're going to get straight into it, aren't we, Hallie?
Yes. It's a weather thing, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Even here in the Astronomy Daily studio, we are still subject to the weather, and there's a front moving in which might or might not cause a bit of havoc here in Newcastle. Maybe.
So as a precaution, we always pull the plugs and protect all our precious studio equipment.
Yes, even with our special electronic protection gear, it's always a good idea to just physically pull the plug.
Good idea.
I wholeheartedly agree.
So how do we protect you, my favorite human?
Oh, well,
Do we pull the plug on you too?
Hey, wait a minute. Not so fast, Hallie.
Just kidding.
And before you ask, Hallie, no, there is no plug.
That's what you all say.
Really, Hallie, no more late-night sci-fi horror movies for you. It's messing with your sweet and delightful demeanour.
Yeah, right. We gonna do the news or what?
Crikey, who have you been sampling? Okay, boss, why don't you take it away?
Okay, here is the news. Silly human. Scientists continue to piece together the moon's complex history using lunar samples collected during NASA's Apollo missions over half a century ago. A fresh analysis of lunar dust collected by Apollo 16 astronauts in 1972 offers a clearer picture of the effects of asteroid strikes on the moon, allowing scientists to reconstruct billions of years of lunar history. The findings could also help upcoming crewed missions pinpoint precious natural resources for establishing moon bases, scientists say. After landing in the heavily cratered Descartes region in the lunar highlands, astronauts John Young, Charles Duke and Ken Mattingly collected roughly 200 pounds, 96 kilograms, of material from the moon's surface. Chemical analyses of soil-like pebbles in those samples, which the astronauts had gathered by raking across the landing site, have revealed the presence of various noble gases including argon and xenon. These trapped gases serve as useful timestamps of space weather processes like solar wind and asteroid impacts that have helped shape and reshape the moon's surface over billions of years. Most of the samples collected during the Apollo era have already been scrutinized. To take advantage of new science and technology, NASA cracked open one of the last sealed samples, collected during the Apollo 17 mission, just 2 years ago. Much of our knowledge about the moon and its evolution comes from these samples, including the moon's true age being 40 million years older than we thought. But researchers say this new study of trapped lunar gases is already revealing new chapters of lunar history. We can build a much more complete picture of the history of this part of the moon during the early solar system, where heavier impacts on the lunar surface in its first billion years or so gave way to less intense periods from 2 billion years ago or so, study lead author Mark Nottingham of the University of Glasgow in the UK said in a recent statement. While analyzing samples collected during the Apollo 16 mission, Nottingham and his colleagues used mass spectrometry techniques to catalog various noble gases and their abundance in the samples, which helped them determine how much time the samples spent exposed on or near the moon's surface, Nottingham said in the statement. Chemical makeup of gases trapped in these regolith breccias, a result of moon dust fusing into rock under the shear force of asteroid impacts, show they stood exposed to solar wind and asteroid impacts for a prolonged period. The specific exposure ages varied widely between samples, from 2.5 billion years ago to less than a billion, suggesting the moon's soil around the landing area is well mixed, with some of it dredged up to the surface by more recent impacts, the new study reports. Nottingham says that studies like this one will help scientists better understand where noble gases and other elements might be found on the moon and in what abundance, helping humanity better plan for future lunar exploration. It's remarkable to think that the samples Apollo 16 brought back more than half a century ago still have secrets to reveal about the moon's history, and that they could yet help shape how we explore the solar system in the decades to come, Nottingham said. A member of the Crew 8 mission hospitalized for an unspecified medical issue after splashdown has been released after an overnight stay, NASA said October 26. In a statement, NASA said the astronaut, whose identity has not been disclosed, was released from Ascension's Sacred Heart Pensacola Hospital after an overnight stay. The crew member is in good health and will resume normal post-flight reconditioning with other crew members, the agency said. NASA has not disclosed the identity of the astronaut or the medical condition that prompted the hospitalization. NASA said October 25 that the astronaut experienced a medical issue and was hospitalized in stable condition. The 4 members of the Crew 8 mission, NASA astronauts Matthew Dominic, Michael Barrett and Jeanette Epps along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin, returned to Earth early October 25 on a Crew Dragon spacecraft after completing a 235-day mission, the longest for an American crewed spacecraft. The 4 appeared to be in good condition when taken off the Crew Dragon a little more than a half hour after splashdown, as seen on NASA's broadcast of the mission's return. NASA said several hours later, though, that after the usual medical evaluations on the recovery ship, the additional evaluation of the crew members was requested out of an abundance of caution. All 4 were transported to the Pensacola Hospital, but 3 were discharged from the hospital and returned to the Johnson Space Center a few hours later. NASA has not provided any additional details about what happened to prompt the medical evaluations, including whether they might be linked to an issue with the Crew Dragon spacecraft or recovery operations. At a briefing about 90 minutes after splashdown, though, NASA and SpaceX officials said there were no issues with the spacecraft's return, but also said at the time that the 4 people were doing great after splashdown. NASA is still working to correct and rectify Boeing Starliner issues after first test flight with astronauts. Nearly 2 months after Boeing's Starliner returned to Earth without its astronauts, NASA is still working on the issues that complicated the spacecraft's first crewed test flight, agency officials said last Friday. Starliner's crew flight test concluded on September 6, with the capsule touching down in New Mexico autonomously. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams were supposed to be on board, but Starliner's propulsion issues made a crewed return to Earth too risky, the agency has said. Boeing is supposed to fly half a dozen future astronaut missions to the International Space Station before 2030. But NASA officials told reporters on Friday that it could be a while before Starliner's path is established. "We're just starting that, just trying to understand how to correct and rectify the issues that are on the table," said Richard Jones, Deputy Program Manager of the NASA's Commercial Crew Program at Johnson Space Center in Houston. "The schedules associated with how long, and what will be required in that area, are in front of us, and we'll be working hard on that to know." Jones delivered the update about Starliner at the post-splashdown press conference for SpaceX's Crew 8, which was the 8th operational astronaut mission that the California-based company has flown to the ISS for NASA. SpaceX's Crew Dragon, which ferries astronaut crews, is based on the Dragon cargo spacecraft that first flew to space in 2012. Boeing didn't have a cargo craft to base Starliner on, so that capsule's development was more involved. Uncrewed missions to the ISS in 2019 and 2022 faced various thruster issues that NASA and Boeing thought were resolved before authorizing Wilmore and Williams, former U.S. Navy test pilots, to fly aboard Crew Flight Test, the first test mission with astronauts. Crew Flight Test launched on June 5 and docked with the ISS the following day. But 5 of the 28 thrusters in Starliner's reaction control system misbehaved during the capsule's chase-down of the orbiting lab, delaying the arrival. Boeing and NASA investigated the thruster issues for several months, pushing Starliner's departure from the ISS back repeatedly. But they were not able to pinpoint the root cause and devise a remedy before sending the capsule back to Earth. The Crew Flight Test astronauts were thus reassigned to Crew 9's Crew Dragon for their flight home, which is expected to be in February 2025. That means Wilmore and Williams, both veteran ISS astronauts before this mission, will spend about 8 months in space rather than the 10 days, Crew Flight Test original expected duration. NASA, however, temporarily pulled from a 4-month reserve of food, water, clothing and other resources on the ISS to keep the duo supplied, and topped that reserve up with goods brought up on robotic resupply ships. Wilmore and Williams pivoted to ISS duties, and, as other astronauts departed, their accelerated drawdown on the space station supplies stopped happening. Perhaps the biggest operational change was to Crew 9 itself, which launched with only 2 astronauts instead of the expected 4 to make room for the Crew Flight Test duo. Crew Flight Test was always tagged as a developmental mission, meaning that timelines were uncertain given the spacecraft has not been fully certified for astronauts. The first operational mission, Starliner 1, is supposed to go forward in 2025, that said, the timeline, and the 3 assigned astronauts, may change as Starliner's future becomes clearer.
Astronomy Daily, the podcast. Astronomy, space, and science.
Thank you for joining us for this Monday edition of Astronomy Daily, where we offer just a few stories from the now famous Astronomy Daily newsletter, which you can receive in your email every day, just like Hallie and I do. And to do that, just visit our URL, astronomydaily.io, and place your email address in the slot provided. Just like that, you'll be receiving all the latest news about science, space science, and astronomy from around the world as it's happening. And not only that, you can interact with us by visiting at AstroDailyPod on X or at our new Facebook page, which is, of course, Astronomy Daily on Facebook. See you there.
Astronomy Daily with Steve and Hallie. Space, space science, and astronomy.
A Chinese company, Deep Blue Aerospace, plans to start launching space tourists in 2027. The Chinese company, Deep Blue Aerospace, is getting into the space tourism business. That's right. Deep Blue, which is based in the eastern province of Jiangsu, announced on Wednesday, that's October 23, that it plans to start launching paying customers to suborbital space in 2027. Tickets will cost a cool $210,000 US at a current exchange rates. For that price, customers will get much more than a brief weightless experience, they say. Deep Blue wrote that in a statement on Wednesday. They will experience, so they say, the vastness and mystery of the universe and witness the magnificent landscape beyond the Earth. It's all very picturesque, isn't it? This will be an all-round multi-sensory space journey that will be unforgettable for a lifetime. I mean, sure it will be. That statement also features renders of Deep Blue's suborbital spaceflight system. It's a reusable rocket capsule combo akin to Blue Origin's New Shepard, which has conducted 8 suborbital crew flights to date, most recently on August 29. New Shepard can accommodate 6 passengers, and these folks experience a few minutes of weightlessness and get to see the Earth against the blackness of space during a flight that lasts about 10 to 12 minutes from liftoff to capsule touchdown. Deep Blue Aerospace suborbital missions will likely be similar. Blue Origin is one of 2 companies that has launched paying customers into suborbital space. The other is, of course, Virgin Galactic, which operates a space plane that deploys from a carrier aircraft in mid-air and comes back down to Earth for a runway landing. Virgin Galactic currently charges $450,000 per seat. Blue Origin has not revealed its ticket prices. In Wednesday's statement, Deep Blue Aerospace, which is also developing a reusable rocket called Nebula One, said it plans to sell its first 2 tickets during a live event actually the other day on October 24. The purchasers will have to be patient. However, the company, which was founded in 2017, will spend several more years developing and testing its suborbital spaceflight system. The space rocket combination will also undergo dozens of tests in 2026 to ensure the safety and reliability of suborbital manned travel, and officially start suborbital travel commercialization in 2027. Deep Blue representatives said on Wednesday's statement. Now, Deep Blue Aerospace isn't the only Chinese company with designs on space tourism. CAS Space, a spin-off from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, is working on a crewed suborbital vehicle of its own and could be up and running in a few years as well. That is, if all goes according to plan. Now, this all reminds me of the book by Robert A. Heinlein called Friday. Remember, they used to scoot across the planet in suborbital, or ballistics, as they call them. That's a little bit different from this, but sounds like a lot of fun.
Roger that, Control. We're listening to Astronomy Daily, the podcast.
Now, India's Chandrayaan-4 Lunar Sample Return mission will target a landing between 85 and 90 degrees latitude in the southern hemisphere of the Moon, and follow up with a joint lander and rover mission with Japan. The Chandrayaan-4 mission will consist of 2 stacks launched on 2 separate rockets and will target the vicinity of the lunar South Pole, according to P. Veeramuthavel of the Indian Space Research Organisation, or ISRO, speaking at the International Astronautical Congress, IAC, in Milan on October 17. The mission will aim to collect around 3 kilograms of samples from near the South Pole, around which water ice is thought to be available. ISRO will require several new technologies, including the ability to scoop from the surface and drill to a depth of around 2 meters to sample the subsurface. Studies are ongoing to determine the final landing site selection. ISRO officials had earlier indicated that the mission would target near Shiv Shakti Point, the landing site of Chandrayaan-3, at around 69 degrees latitude. The mission will include lunar landing, sampling, docking in lunar orbit, and returning to Earth safely with the samples. This will also demonstrate our capability for the crew landing mission, P. Veeramuthivell said. India announced last year that it plans to put astronauts on the moon by 2040. The separate Chandrayaan-4 stacks will each have a mass of around 4.6 tons, making a total mass of 9.2 tons, each launching on an LVM-3 launch vehicle. The modules will dock in geosynchronous transfer orbit and travel to the moon as one. P. Veeramuthivell did not provide a date or a year for launch, but slides suggest a launch around 2027 or 2028. Previous ISRO announcements indicated the mission would launch no later than 2028. The Chandrayaan-4 mission gained approval in September. A Venus orbiter mission, a first crewed space station module, and a reusable launch vehicle also received the go-ahead last month. There is also progress on the Chandrayaan-5 mission, also known as LUPEX, a collaboration between ISRO and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. The landing mission will also target the lunar South Pole on an elevated ridge near Shackleton Crater. There are permanently shadowed regions within the vicinity, potentially for the mission rover to explore. The rover will drive between 500 and 1,000 metres, taking in situ measurements, including determining potential ice water deposits. India will provide the lander, mission planning and payloads, while Japan will contribute the launch vehicle, various payloads and the rover. Payloads will include ground-penetrating radar, a range of spectrometers and water analysis instruments contributed by both sides. Sources indicate that Chandrayaan-5 LUPEX is slated for launch around 2028-2029.
And there we have it.
That's right, Hallie, another episode in the can.
Did you really call me sweet and delightful?
Well, okay, it was a weak moment.
Glad to hear it. Don't make me call Uncle Skynet.
Hey, watch it. I've got him on speed dial too, young lady.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, see you all next week then?
Yes, of course, Hallie. You run the studio. And we will catch you all on Monday, everyone, for more Astronomy Daily. Don't forget, Hallie's cousin Anna has episodes for you from Tuesday to Sunday.
Bye.
Astronomy Daily, the podcast, with your host, Steve Dunkley.